Alright, so further continuing our previous lesson. So here we're going to talk about the utilization of the fluids with respect to the particles. Before I proceed, if I'm going to play the timeline, you must be noticing that the FPS has been really dipped because due to the presence of the fluid in our scene, the reaction is going to be really very slow. So what we can do that we can just hide that stuff at least for now, and just can start taking some few more changes inside the parent particles. The thing is that the parent particles are also keep on bursting out, but we also want them to be get reduced, because some sort of resistance would also be on them, technically speaking. So we'll like to select the parent underscore burst, and under the conserve over here we like to give it to 0.98 or maybe to 0.99. Okay, because of that only we are actually giving the P underscore emitter with the away from the axis a high speed. I think so I should need to give them 60. Okay, so if I gonna play that up, let us see at what frame they are start getting died. I think so it's approximately the 42 frame, let us say, because the particle count is now getting decreased. And if we're going to switch on the fluid emitter, you may could see that they are not even crossing this one. So the good thing would be that you may could take the reaction to a little bit more higher. Let's say 65 would be the good start. And you may also wish to reduce the size of your container from 160 to 150 only. Okay, that is something nice. Now again, I'd like to put them to the hide mode, and we also need to check some few more things, like again the live forever attribute shouldn't be there, I suppose. Yeah, it's already given the random range. The child burst also has been given with a random range, so that's absolutely fine. Now it's time to work upon the fluids. Let me just unhide that stuff. Okay, for the fluid container also, let's say change the name from fluid to, let's say, energy underscore burst. That would be much appreciable. Energy underscore burst. Okay, so now the real story is getting started from this phase. The story says that this is the parent particles. These are already driving the child particles. Now they would be taking care of the fluid also. The thing is that this fluid will also going to get emit from the parent particles, and the velocity field of this fluid will going to affect the child particle in terms of the fields. All right, so first what I do need to do, I need to select the fluid, and I need to select the parent burst particles, not the emitter, the particles. And under the fluids I can go add edit contents, and let's say emit from the object. The emitter type would remain going to be the omni, and apply and close. Okay, so uh, with that you're gonna see the fluid emitter. Okay, let's just keep it only fluid emitter only. We don't need to provide it the burst emitter. So the fluid emitter need to undergo with a lot of changes. First of all, the changes are, now this is basically really really important and highly subtle in values. If you're going to change the values, there are so many changes, even in some small changes of the parameters of the attributes. Let's first of all switch on this motion streak. For those who need a little bit refresh, motion streak is the attribute which is accountable for the fast moving of the fluids. If you're going to switch that on, you won't be expecting any stamp size or any bad pattern of the fluids, but provided it should be having enough amount of the voxels as well as the substeps inside the solver attributes. Okay, this is very very important attributes. The jitter we don't want, we want the smooth flow of the reactions. However, I would like to keep that up at least for now. And now coming back here, you can see the moment I switch on this motion streak, you're going to find something called the max distance. This is the distance from which the fluid will be emitting from the particles. One is quite a huge, so we like to keep them up approximately, let's say 0.35, but I guess I would like to come back to the 0.5. Okay, so at least for now the max distance has been reduced. So if this has been reduced, we need to increase the rate of the fluid particles that we're going to emit the density voxels per seconds. So let's say we'll start with 3500. Okay, we don't need any heat, we don't need any fuel, so put that thing off. And there are certain attributes which are not accountable, at least for this reaction, because we're not going to utilize any, we're not going to see any fluid inside the reaction. This is just the particles. And moving forward, one of the most important section for our course is the emission speed attributes. The moment the fluid bursts out, the motion of the particles would be adding additional velocity fields to the fluid. So that would be taking place from this step. The speed method has to be the add, and the inherent velocity has to be 1.5. All right. So that means along with its own speed, the particle speed is also adding much impact, and the inherent velocity completely means that the way the particles are moving, the fluid are also going to follow them, which is extremely important. Now all these settings are completely done. What else we could do is that just close that stuff. Approximately 90% things have been done. Now the 10% things are where this child attribute will go. Obviously, the velocity field of these fluids will be affecting the child underscore burst. So instead of selecting them and doing in this way, going here, I recommend you to go to the relationship editors, go to the dynamic relationships, and select the child underscore burst, and there is a field which is energy underscore burst, that is a fluid. Click them up. Okay, so with that, your particles are associated with the fluids. Okay, so we just talk a lot. Now it's time to see the change. It will gonna take a little bit time, guys. Okay, so be a little bit patient. That's absolutely amazing. Okay, but one problem is that the child particles haven't been given with the conserve. We need to give them to 0. All right, otherwise they're going to burst that out. The same thing you can recall from our previous lessons, when from the rising particles from the source, they were just trying to cross the boundaries of the fluid container. So now if I have to come back and play the timeline, you should be seeing a very nice amount of the reaction, and here is in front of you. Now the only thing we need to acknowledge is that the shading and the look and feel. And do you also acknowledge the streaks that are coming? We're also going to come back on them. Okay, but for now, let's just take a quick break. We're not going to do much in this. These are the particles, and I think just forgot to switch off the fluid. We just don't want the fluid to come. So go over here and you need to reduce under the shading. Let's say bring that thing to 0 transparency and no opacity. And just for being on a safer side, although I do acknowledge that this won't going to affect, but just to be on a safer side under the lighting, do not switch on the real lights. Okay, because obviously we do need to use some ray trace shadows, so I don't want your scene to get affected by any way. Okay, so these are the nice things which we are getting. So it's time to work upon the shading of the particles. So I think I need to take a break. So I'm going to catch you up in the next lesson.